Vashi, and I'm here to kick off day 2 of E2. I hope you all are having as much fun as we all are. Yesterday, we were inspired by special guests like Anthony Solcito and Dr. Jackie Sanderlin. We also heard from the student winners of the AI for Good Challenge. We also learned a lot from demos that were led by Microsoft innovative educators and Showcase School leaders. I still can't believe that we fit 10 demos in just one day. We're going to continue learning today with 25 personal growth sessions that were based on your requests and feedback. We'll be streaming this content in multiple time zones, so make sure you build your schedule so that it works for you and that you're able to connect with attendees from all over the world. I cannot wait to get started, but before we do, I'd like to introduce you to my friend, Andreas Schleich. Andreas is from OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. He oversees PISA, the Program for International Student Assessment, and other international assessment instruments. As a leader in international education and research, he is here today to share new insights on digital learning and the growing importance of developing social emotional skills. Andreas, the floor is yours.
Thank you for inviting me. Tracking the quality of student learning has been part of the DNA of the OECD since over 20 years. Look how the world has changed since the year 2000 when it comes to technology. But when you look at the performance of students, the capacity to manage complex information, you can see that has barely moved over this period. Just think about one number. In the year 2018, just 9% of students could reliably distinguish fact from opinion. You could argue that's better than in the year 2000 when it was just 7%. But we live in a totally different world. In the year 2000, reading was about extracting knowledge from prefabricated text. You read linear text books. When you didn't know the answer to a question, you could look it up in an encyclopedia. You could trust the answer you find there always to be true. Today, you look at things on Google and you're going to find 100,000 answers to your question, and nobody will tell you what is right and what is wrong, what is true and what is not true. Literacy is no longer about extracting knowledge, it's about constructing knowledge, a much more demanding skill set. But again, the world has changed and our education systems have not caught up with this. And now some people say, well, let's just do more of the same. But this slide shows you already today there is huge variability in the quantity of time that students spend learning in school, that you see here in blue, and then out of school in yellow. The United Arab Emirates comes out number 1, close to 60 hours that students spend learning per week. But you contrast that with Finland on the left side, just 37 hours, a little bit more than half of that. Huge variation in the quantity of learning. But when you look at productivity, you can see suddenly, in a country like Finland, students learn a lot in very little time, whereas in the United Arab Emirates, they spend a lot of time and learn very little. Success in education is not about the quantity of learning, nor even just about money. It has a lot to do with other attributes. Let me just give you one example. Actually, you can look, for example, the growth mindset of students. You can see a country like Estonia, where students believe that, the effort they place on learning, the idea that, they master their own learning, they are the engineers of their own success. And you can see they have that growth mindset, and they also come out so well on the PISA assessment. You contrast it with a country like Indonesia, where students believe, success is largely about, the intelligence with which I was born. There's nothing I can really do about it. And you can see actually the education system very much struggles with basic outcomes. Suddenly you see questions around mindset become very strong predictors of the success of an education system, of the success of students. It's not just about, mathematics and reading. It's also about other things. We could see that where students have a stronger growth mindset, they were more motivated to master difficult tasks. They had a greater sense of self-efficacy. They were less afraid of failure. And think about it. In the time in which we live, we want the next generation to be curious, to invent, to imagine. If you want to do that, you need to take risks. You need to experiment. If you take risks, you're likely to make mistakes. If our education systems are not good in helping students learn from and with mistakes, young people probably will not become so creative. You can see that growth mindset is a strong predictor. Students with that mindset were also more likely to establish ambitious learning goals or to see greater value in school. So that led us to look at, social emotional learning in much greater depth. Let me show you some more examples from our PISA assessment. Cognitive ability. In most countries, students say, I can change my behavior to meet the needs of new situations. I can deal with unusual situations. When encountering difficult situations with other people, I think of a way to resolve the situation. Fewer students, less than 50%, said they could adapt easily to a new culture on average across the industrialized world. But what's so interesting, that varies hugely across countries as well. And I highlight two countries that you would always associate it, with great success in mathematics and science. Macau, China, or Vietnam. Very strong performing education systems. But when it comes to that, students' cognitive ability, those education systems have a long way to go. On the other hand, you can see, countries like Mexico and Turkey that are still, emerging education systems, but students have learned to deal with ambiguity, with uncertainty. So it's worth having those aspects in mind. We also were very interested in this modern interconnected world. To what extent can young people see the world through different lenses, perspectives, appreciate different ways of thinking, different cultures? And you can see here on average across countries, the majority of students say, I want to learn how people live in different countries. I'm interested in how people from various cultures see the world. But once again, that varies hugely across countries. Some countries, that is a predominant attitude. In other countries, that is quite rare. And so we ask ourselves, where do those attitudes, those values come from? To what extent do they originate in education? To make that question more concrete, what is the attitude of students to newcomers, to immigrants? And you can see on average, overall, immigrant children, students say at age 15, immigrant children should have the same opportunities for education that other children in the country have. Immigrants should have all the same rights that everyone else in the country has. It's still 80% of students on average. But then when you drill down, you see also here huge variability. You can see countries like Portugal, like Canada, like Korea, where that attitude is very widespread. But you take a country like Hungary, where that is only a minority of students believing in this. Now, of course, if you want to develop an attitude towards immigrants, you probably need to see some diversity around you. And when we ask students about this, you could see, well, in my circle of friends, I have people from other countries in my family. And then comes school. So school is a very important place for young people to meet the diversity of our societies. And then, of course, the neighborhood is as well. And what's so interesting, what we could see from our data, where students had more contact with other people from other countries, they were more interested to learn about other cultures. So that interest didn't just come, from what teachers did, it comes from, experience. It's a very important message. Social emotional learning is not just about, what you are taught, but also about what is caught. We could also see where students had more contact with people from other countries. They had generally more positive attitudes towards immigrants. And when we try to connect all of this, we could see basically where students were more capable to take different perspectives, to appreciate different ways of thinking. They generally also had more respect for people from other cultures. They had a more positive attitude towards immigrants. They also showed a greater sense of cognitive adaptability, being open to the novelty, to new paradigms. They were more interested in learning about other cultures. So we could suddenly see those aspects are connected. And that led us at the OECD to take a much more systematic look at social and emotional skills, and also to give greater importance to the life cycle development. Some of those skills are developed early on at the age of 5. We're starting to do our first assessment. Then at the age of 10 and 15, sort of critical phases of schooling, we're looking at this again. And then, of course, in adulthood. We all know, the way we relate to other people at the workplace has a huge impact on, how productive we are in our work collectively. So looking at this systematically, you might say, well, why starting at age 5? But actually, some of our research shows that some skills, like, emotional control, like empathy, are developed very early on. Later in life, they become, character qualities, personality traits. It's very hard for us to change them. But in the early years, we have a unique opportunity to shape those kinds of dispositions that people have. So that's why starting early with this is so important, and tracking social emotional learning since the early ages is crucial. And of course, there are many things that you can look at. And we picked, 5 major constructs that are quite commonly used in the, psychological literature: task performance, the emotional regulation, the collaboration, social skills, open-mindedness. You saw already some data on cognitive adaptability, and also engaging with others. So those were the major kind of dimensions that we looked at through many kind of aspects in the survey. And of course, we want to see how we can change and improve those kinds of dimensions. And that's why we collected lots of data from the context in which students learn. Now, we looked at the children themselves. We looked at the parents. We looked at teachers. We looked at school principals to get, a good sense for the social fabric in which students learn and teachers teach. And for the age groups 10 and 15-year-olds, we at the very beginning, we just piloted this in a few countries, actually a few education systems. Often they were cities. You can see them here on the map. It was important for us to cover the world, to have many different cultures represented here, also to see to what extent those metrics actually are valid and meaningful across cultural boundaries. So that's basically the big spread that you can see here. So let me share you some results. They're still preliminary. We're going to publish them only in a few months' time and everything is done, but some results are already emerging and they're really interesting. When I look at gender, for example, in our PISA assessment of mathematics and science, we don't see big gender differences generally. And most education systems do quite well equipping boys and girls, at 15 with a good foundation in mathematics and science. Now, when it comes to social emotional skills, you can see some important differences. For example, when it comes to engaging with other people or emotional regulation, boys tended to report those aspects more frequently than girls did. At the same time, you can see girls, more prominent on other aspects. Now, when it comes to tolerance, when it comes to empathy, when it comes to social skills, cooperation, sense of responsibility, motivation, and curiosity is still a kind of small advantage. So suddenly you see we have achieved, gender parity on many cognitive aspects of learning. We pride ourselves that, boys and girls get good foundational skills. When you look at some of the social emotion skills, the big gender difference is left often because we don't regularly see that. Now you don't get school marks on those kinds of dimensions. But once we make those skills visible, we can actually get a very interesting picture of this. We saw that in all of the participating cities, boys were indicating higher stress resistance, greater optimism, greater sense of emotional control. And once again, in a volatile, uncertain, ambiguous world, those dimensions are actually very, very important, not just as predictors for academic outcomes, but also in their own right. And you can see actually that worked pretty well across the cities that we surveyed. So it's a quite uniform picture. You look at other aspects, you can see in almost all of the participating cities, girls were indicating higher responsibility, greater sense of empathy, greater sense of cooperation. Few exceptions, Daegu in Korea, in Suzhou in China, the picture was not so clear, but in most other countries, you could see actually those were dimensions where girls were indicating this. So basically, it shows us that it's worth to look at those kinds of social emotional skills. They should not get lost because they tell us things that we do not get from usual school reports, from reports on mathematics and science performance, from our usual PISA assessments. And let me go one step further, look beyond, outcomes towards a sense of student well-being. We measured that as well through a common index that is used by the WHO, the World Health Organization. And so that's our metric here of student well-being. And then we looked at, to what extent do the social emotional skills that we measure through students' self-report relate to their well-being. And we could see actually for some dimensions, you could see a clear relationship. The darker on this chart, the shading, the stronger relationships. You can see optimism, where students had a sense of optimism, they generally also had a greater sense of well-being. We could also see stress resistance, working in the same kind of way in most of the regions. And then also energy, where students felt a sense of energy and also felt a greater sense of well-being. So suddenly you can see social emotional skills and student well-being are closely intertwined. Let me show you some more data on this in detail now. And that's actually one of the concerns that we have. What we saw here is that well-being often declines from early childhood education to adolescence, particularly though for girls. Here you can see basically the picture at age 10. You can see most students say my daily life is filled with things that interest me. I woke up feeling fresh and rested. I felt active and vigorous. I felt calm and relaxed. I felt cheerful and in good spirit. And you can see a little bit more for boys, a little less for girls, but for both 10-year-olds, actually the numbers are very, very high. But then when you look at this again at the age of 15, you can see the bars get a lot shorter and the gender gap gets a lot bigger. Look at this, I woke up feeling fresh and rested, over 30% of girls, but less than 20% boys, but less than 20% of girls. We should ask ourselves, why does that sense of energy, that sense of well-being actually decline as students grow older? Shouldn't our environments, whether at home or in school, support the well-being of students and the development? Maybe there's a little bit, also maybe students become more aware of themselves, have more difficulties, become more aware of difficulties. There may be many factors contributing to this, but it seems we should be paying closer attention to this, and that's exactly what this assessment tries to do. We saw also that, predictors of good health, as reported by students, were stress resistant, optimism, and energy. And again, you could see that working in all of the cities for which we had comparative data. The length of the bar varies a bit, but the direction is always the same. So those kinds of social emotional capabilities seem to be positively related to good health. In all cities, students also who reported a greater feeling of belonging, a sense of belonging in school, were also indicating higher stress resistance, optimism, and sociability. And the sense of belonging of students is something that we can actually directly kind of manage. We can create an environment in which students, feel a sense of belonging, where they work well with their colleagues, where there's a high spirit of collaboration in the school. So these are things that are not, outside of our control. They could be at the center of education systems. And you can see certainly, those things seem to be related to other aspects. In almost all of the cities, you could see also students who reported to be bullied indicated lower stress resistance, lower sense of optimism, lower sense of trust. We do not know what the kind of causal nature of that relationship. This could be, that students who are bullied will lose their optimism, will lose their trust, will lose their resistance. It could be that where students have lower stress resistance, they are more likely to be the victim of bullying. But it shows us that combating violence at school, creating an environment where students feel safe, where students can sort of express themselves and so on, seems to be a quite important objective in itself. As you can see, this is just the beginning. We're just scratching the surface of a very interesting and very inspiring new data set. There's so much more that we will be talking about. But the main message really is that we need to take a wider look at learning outcomes. Our education systems have been very good at educating second-class robots, people who are good at repeating what we tell them. In this, time of artificial intelligence, we need to think much harder, what makes us humans? How do we complement, not substitute, the artificial intelligence that we have created in our computers? And that means we need to look beyond, reading mathematics and science towards a wider range of human capabilities when we assess the learning outcomes. Now, one thing is clear: the kind of things that are easy to teach, maybe easy to test, are also the kind of things that are now easy to digitize, to automate. The world no longer rewards you just for what you know. Now, Google knows everything. The world rewards you for what you can do with what you know, how you interact with others. Those are things that are very important. And there is some interesting data to support them. We can see, for example, also in the literature that, better social and emotional skills are associated with higher educational attainment. You could see some data on that. Now, we see some important relationships with physical and mental health, with interpersonal trust and tolerance, with later prospects of employment, entrepreneurship, even income. Those aspects are actually at the individual level very, very important. And, we all have an intuitive sense for this. None of this will surprise you. But actually now we can actually study those things in a more scientific way. Interestingly, it's not just about, individual kind of benefits. We see higher levels of civic engagement, and particularly in these times, we know how important it is, a vibrant, cohesive society. Once again, something that we can shape through social emotional skills. We see a positive relationship with law-abiding behavior. People who have that confidence, who have those kinds of social emotional capabilities, are much more willing to build that kind of bridging social capital, to trust in the institutions around them. And then last but not least, you could see some data on, the sense of happiness of people, their well-being, their life satisfaction, also important outcomes. Now, that's why that matter for individuals and societies, but even employers see great benefits out of this. Adaptability in a fast-changing labor market, where today is going to be different than tomorrow. We need people who are not just capable, but also willing to learn consciously, but also to unlearn and to relearn when the context changes, who are resilient. And that means basically, trying again when I fail, finding a new avenue towards this, not giving up, who are resourcefulness, who are able to sort of deploy their cognitive, social, and emotional resources in a specific context, and obviously who are better at working together with other people. So there are many reasons why we should be paying more attention to this, but that means we also need to become better at measuring those aspects, because we will not change, we will not improve what we cannot see, what we cannot measure, and that's really what this work of the OECD is all about. Thank you very much.
I'm in VP in Microsoft's education engineering team, working on analytics and customer success platforms. And I have the privilege this morning to be sharing the work that we've been doing in education insights, some work that allows the data that is thrown off or produced by our learning platforms, Teams, Office, etc., to be returned to you, the educator, and education system leaders to help drive learning success. We've been working very hard on this, and today I'm going to be telling you the foundational motivation for it, the capabilities of the product today, and even include a sneak peek of some work that will soon be available to you to extend the capabilities of Insights. So the context, the starting point for this is, of course, the unprecedented period of time we have all been through as digital learning platforms were explosively adopted during COVID. This seismic quantum change in the pedagogies of most global education institutions has impacted everyone. And even as in-person schooling begins to come back, and we certainly eagerly look forward to that, there are now 200 million education users globally using Teams as a learning hub. And the digital learning platform and Teams includes education insights, the subject of today's talk, but it's more about the opportunity that such platforms have to return information to you, the customer, to the educator, to the education system leaders, students, that helps support the learning process. And so this is why we've built Education Insights, because it turns out it's really hard to teach in the dark. And certainly pre-COVID, we would have said, wow, the physical classroom is a super important resource, it still is, for educators to understand what's going on in the classroom. But in a world where class is actually meeting in the digital domain, unfortunately, you've been in the dark. And the purpose of Insights is to turn on the light. And in fact, to help you, the educator, education system leader, understand what's going on all the way down to the student level, and take advantage of that and the insights we derive from how students are engaging, and present to help you ensure that every student has the appropriate, unique, dedicated experience based on a complete understanding of how they are or are not engaging with the platform, Teams, their peers, their assignments, etc. So this is the purpose of Insights. And it all starts with the student. It's not really the data that drives this. It's what the student is doing as reflected by it. And on an understanding of student, we layer on capabilities as concentric circles to allow constituents to take advantage of insights about what's going on and to make meaningful and informed decisions based on what's actually happening. So what is happening? Well, what's happening is people are working super hard to learn in digital learning platforms. Today, that's often online exclusively, moving towards hybrid, but even in person. Kids will have assignments that they do. They'll do work at home. They will do work. In fact, we've often said we may have had an experience with COVID and the digital learning platforms that ends snow days or stay-at-home sick days, where maybe we got to sit at home on the couch watching game shows or something, trying to feel better. Kids will likely have the opportunity in a great many places to continue attending classes, maybe to their chagrin. But in any event, the learning process and you, the educator's support of it, is what we're all here for. So let's talk about how we think about informing it. The first question, turning on the light, what the heck's going on? And we work super hard to return that information to you in a way that's consumable and sort of processable, because we've done some AI work to sort of pull out what's salient. For example, hey, did you know you've got a student that turns almost all of her students in, or all of her assignments in late? She gets a good grade and she joins meetings late. That's kind of an interesting commonality. And as an educator, you might want to do the metaphoric tap on the shoulder and say, hey, things might be easier for you if you worked a little bit on time management. And you have entire classrooms of students, and being able to understand how the aggregate experience of the classroom is proceeding with the requisite reports to dive in and understand more about that. We're going to drill on this in a moment, but supporting detection of what's going on, reflecting at the class level of what's going on. Of course, Teams, being a communication hub, presents lots of opportunities to reach out and connect with the student in a message, in real-time communication, perhaps email if that's the desired modality. And finally, and sort of most importantly, educators are constantly taking actions, small shifts, sometimes big shifts, guidance, coaching, sometimes explicit interventions, and the platform is still there watching what's going on. For example, if the aforementioned student took actions based on the mentioned tap on the shoulder, we actually noticed the positive changes too. We noticed, hey, the last 2 assignments were Jasmine turned in on time, and she's no longer late for meetings. So in supporting all of this, let's take a little deeper dive into the capabilities of the product, and we'll talk about what it does today, and then I'll share and preview some of the exciting things coming in the future. The first place to start is the landing page for educators, because teachers have more than one class. And we present a view of, in summary, of the data reflected by all of your classes, seeing students that are present, seeing the engagement at this meta level, so you can see high-level trends and quickly spot what you need to look more closely at. Having clicked down a level and decided you want to look more closely at something, you have a class detail overview. And this has several different components on it that, again, provide sort of the next layer of the onion of what's actually going on. And what I want to focus on next are the boxes sort of in the middle, because we've taken work to do the AI and detection of what the data reveal that might not otherwise be clear. For example, did you know that there's a student who wasn't active over a period of time? Or did you know that 40% of your students do assignments late at night? Or that one student hasn't started their assignment? These are examples or insights that are hugely valuable to educators and education system leaders who can take really great actions potentially on them. We, Microsoft, don't have any idea what the appropriate sort of conclusion that should be drawn, or what intervention, if any, or action, if any, should be taken. But what we can do is try to put you, the educator, in possession of the information to make better decisions and help support the learning process on a student-by-student basis. So continuing, you can, of course, look at the view of how students are engaged during the day. So the little blue lines you see in the chart here tell you that students are actually doing work. I'd point out that this is actually done in near real time, so order seconds delay, which means if you've given an assignment to the class to spend the next half hour reading something and writing up a paper, you'll literally be able to see, did they do what you asked them to do? Again, we talk about one of the sort of side effects of this product for students, as distinct from when you or I went to school, is the dog ate my homework excuse is soon a thing of the past. In any event, you, the educator, get to understand what's happening in terms of engagement with the technology. And you also, whoops, I think I went one slide too many. You also get to understand what's going on with grades, and whether or not students are doing well. You can see distribution, how they're doing on assignments, and whether or not they are completing them, turning them in, whether they've been handed back, etc. And of course, how your students are and are not using the communication capabilities of Teams to to talk about and have discussions in class or otherwise demonstrate engagement in the learning process. So all of these, we'll quickly go through the slides, sort of lead to the opportunity to drive into a specific student in any of those dimensions and understand how that specific student is doing if the summary reports present a need to do so. All of this, again, is empowering you to take action to help support the learning journey. So let's now shift gears and talk about some new capabilities that are coming that, frankly, we're very excited about. The first one I want to talk about is reading progress. This will be available this spring. It's in TAP today. In fact, this was discussed yesterday in a session. Mike Tolson from the engineering team hosted a session about this. But the capability is sort of in two parts. The first is that the assignment service gains the ability to assign a student the task of reading text. The assignment infrastructure then listens to what the student is doing, listens to the words as they are formed, and reports and reflects back which words are said correctly, nearly correctly, or not correctly. It records the student doing this so that you can go back and see what the student and listen to and see how the student formed the words with their mouth and obviously the sound they created. And what you're seeing here is a summary view that allows you, the educator, to see, oh, well, these are the areas that the words, if you will, that are multiple students are finding challenges with. And this is how reading rate progress is happening. Now, a lot of this kind of sort of pedagogical testing is done today by hand. And what this capability will do is support the process of reading, obviously for learning to read for obviously any learners of language, whether that's just emergent learners because they're young or just learning English, or any other language as we expand to support other languages. We're very excited about connecting you, the educator, to this much more powerful, scaled understanding of how reading progress is happening in your classrooms. The next sort of topic and new capability that we are building into Education Insights is called Reflect. And Reflect is a set of capabilities in the social and emotional learning domain. Because we know, as the research reflects, that there have been enormous challenges in the hybrid learning experience, the remote learning experience, with student sort of motivation, wide shifts in emotions, challenging for all of us. School, students, work, you, me, we're all feeling it. And in the classroom, we've built a set of capabilities to actually put the educator and indeed the student sort of in the driver's seat with respect to reflecting, hence the name, on how they are feeling and sharing that. So students can report in a simple scale, how are they feeling? And we gather this information up and allow educators to understand what their students are reporting themselves about how they are doing. And of course, you can look at trends over time. You can look at how the class is doing over time. And of course, you can look at how the students are doing over time and begin to get a feel for the collective, at least self-reported mood and how the class is dealing with remote learning. So circling all back around, in this case, there's a student experience as well, right? And what's important about this is you're also helping students understand that they have sort of control and the opportunity and can practice self-expression, sharing how they are doing, and that it matters and that it counts. So for students, they can also see their own trends and reflect on how their mood has changed over time. So this set of capabilities, the ability to do reading progress, to understand reading rates, explicitly drive improvements, and have students practice and improve their reading through assignments in a highly scalable digital way, and to bring social and emotional capabilities to the Insights platform and to the Teams experience and to the Microsoft Education Digital Learning platform are two exciting, soon to be available extensions coming to the product. So now moving on to another set of new capabilities that are coming to the Education Insights product. And that is, we've talked a lot about the classroom, what teachers for a class or for groups of classes can see and process and understand, and what insights are delivered. Coming now, this is also in TAP. What that means is, I'll show you a link at the end of the talk where you can sign up to join. You can join the program to let organizations look at aggregations of data across many teachers with the obvious kinds of buckets, so schools or maybe districts, and look at summary views. So two of the core capabilities that are sort of layered on everything I've talked about so far to deliver this. The first is organizational structure. Like you have to teach the system which classes belong to which schools, or the system can't actually reflect that accurately. And the way that you do this is school data sync. School data sync connects to the student information system operating in your school, reads out what are the classes, who are the students, how do they fit together into schools if there are multiple schools, and lays all of this information down in such a way that Insights can then use it to create the reporting structure necessary for organizational level insights. And importantly, even critically, one of those capabilities is that as you begin aggregating data, it becomes super important that IT, or for lack of a better way of putting it, the institution, have the ability to scope who can see what data. For example, it's quite common for principals to be given the ability to see the data associated with the classes in their schools, and not necessarily the data associated with classes in other schools. And this product supports that explicit scoping, assigning roles, principal, maybe academician, and then resulting permissions that come with them to scope and scale which subset of the data is available to that person. And then when that person goes to the Insights experience, they see very, very quickly, with the same kind of insights, what's going on at the organizational level and aggregation across all the classes. For example, well, this institution appears to be reflecting moods that are sort of significantly different enough from other institutions in your broader organization that it's made a spotlight. Or this organization is doing really well with digital engagement. This organization perhaps has a higher attendance challenge in its digital meetings in the last week than the other, etc. And of course, at any point, you can drill down into what's actually happening on an organization basis. Sort of with this foundation, or to this foundation of sort of us deriving insights, sort of at a more simple level, the act of the transformation of your organization, the adoption by educators, by students, of the digital learning platforms is something we got a lot of feedback from customers about, wanting to be able to understand how it's going. Are people using it? Are they understanding how engagement's really happening? Sort of a tidbit I mentioned on the first slide, and I didn't say too much about it at the time. In some jurisdictions, the state of California, there are several countries who also have regulations. It's actually incumbent on the educational institution to prove that students are attending digital class just as they are required to prove they are attending in-person class. And this product is the means by which you explicitly get the proof that students are engaged. See, they came to class, they did this. And so for a variety of reasons, this is a powerful launch point for understanding how things are going at the organizational level. Still another dimension would be workload. Well, how many hours are people working? You saw the insight about, hey, did you know your kids are doing 40% of your kids are doing work at night? Well, the institutional version of this might be, gee, this school has significantly higher workloads, as expressed at least in how students are engaging, than does another school. We, Microsoft, have no point of view about what that means. We can't know what that means. It could be one school has too much engagement. It could be one school doesn't have enough. And it could be neither of those is true and exactly the right thing is happening. The point is, leadership shouldn't operate in the dark any more than the teachers in the classroom should operate in the dark. And we are working as fast as we can to continue to provide more and more light, more and more insight and awareness by simply returning the data to you that was yours all along, for what's actually going on. For example, what is the relative mood of your schools, and are there those that we should work on creating a more positive climate? Yet another dimension where the aggregated view can help leadership understand and act and take action intentionally and with understanding instead of being in the dark. So I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes because it's really, really important to emphasize that the data that supports learning is being returned to you, the customer, and only you, the customer, and only for the purpose of supporting learning. We follow several regulations globally, a couple are listed. What's not listed is we also follow Microsoft's stringent compliance standards. Microsoft itself has no permission or access to any of the data that I've just articulated being used to drive insights. It's all done with AI-derived models, and what happens in your tenancy, in your instance of Office 365, stays in your tenancy. No one has permission to see what they do not and are not given permission to see. So I do want to emphasize that we think very, very hard about and work very hard to abide the principles of data security and data privacy, are held to extraordinarily high standards, and understand that what we are doing is returning what has always been the institution's purview and property, meaning how is digital learning proceeding as reflected in the data. It is your data. It's not Microsoft. We're just giving it back to you and working super hard to package it and process it and turn it into a resource that you can use to help kids learn. So that's what it's actually all about. I reflect, reuse that word myself often, on the privilege I feel personally at having the opportunity to work on technology whose sole purpose is to help learners thrive, to help the constituents who similarly wake up every day with the mission of helping learners thrive. That's you, the educators, the education system leaders. Thank you for sharing this mission with us. Thank you for everything you do. Please keep telling us what more we can do in this product, the products that we've talked about here. In other products, we continue to get refinement or to get feedback, to take it, to refine, and to learn from you. I'm fond of saying we, Microsoft, are not educators. All we can do is listen as hard as we can to those who are, and use what we hear to continue to invest in creating great tooling, great products, and a great platform to help you do your jobs better and to help learners thrive. So as I wrap up, I want to sort of reflect on and provide some more capability, some more resources and other opportunities. The first is a long form of some of the information that I presented here today. This is the first URL. There's a number of resources present, videos, more extensive use cases, etc., that help you understand how Insights is being used, can be used in your institution, in your classroom going forward. And the next link is about getting help onboarding. And in particular, I mentioned that the leader version of Insights today is in a TAP program. That means a scoped or limited set of customers who we are adding to the set of customers using it as we gain confidence in the product's completeness and readiness, listen, fix the obvious gaps, and grow and learn, getting ready to launch this product in the spring. And if you are interested in taking advantage of that product in your institution, there's a form to fill out there to go and express that interest. So aka.ms Insights, resources, and Insights join. That's how you can find out more information. And I'll sort of wrap things up as I sort of stated in the slide previous. Thank you, sincerely, from Microsoft, certainly from myself personally, from our team, for inspiring us to work as hard as we can to help you do what you do. It's amazing, and we look forward to hearing from you, learning from you, and continuing to do even more to inspire us to help you. Thank you very much. Insights, resources, and Insights join. That's how you can find out more information. And I'll sort of wrap things up as I sort of stated in the slide previous. Thank you, sincerely, from Microsoft, certainly from myself personally, from our team.
Hi, I'm Nathan.
And I'm Rob.
Come and join us for one of the best presentations here at E2.
We're both teachers from Brisbane Catholic Education in Australia.
Using Minecraft Education is one of the easiest ways to ensure engagement with your students. This session will show you one of the ways you can use Minecraft in your classroom today. The possibilities are endless.
The worlds you see that we're travelling through here have all been created by students. They've created worlds about the Australian gold rush, the first fleet to Australia, renewable energy, and some teams have even replicated our federal parliament house.
Minecraft Education can be used in history, English, science, technology, mathematics, and in areas such as diversity and inclusion. Really, let's be honest, there are ways to use it in almost every subject. It can be a great task for individuals, or when you want your students to work collaboratively in groups.
So come and join us for a fun learning adventure as we go through the basics of hosting a class in a Minecraft world. And remember, this is your chance to give your students the opportunity to show you what they can do using the most engaging, creative and exciting tool available now.
Hi there, and welcome to this session on hosting a class using Minecraft Education Edition. My name is Nathan Richards, and shortly we're going to be joined by Rob Burke. Both Rob and I are teachers and leaders who support the use of Microsoft products, including Minecraft Education Edition, for about 146 schools in southeast Queensland here in Australia. Today we're going to have a look at things you need to consider before getting started, how you might find a world, how you then get those students to join that world, and then what you might do to collect evidence of their work. So first things first, what you need to think about before getting started. Apart from obviously making sure that the Minecraft software is loaded onto your student's device and that they have their usernames and passwords ready, you want to make sure that all of them are on the same version. Otherwise, you won't be able to get them to join together at the same time. The other thing to keep in mind is that you can only host 30 students or 30 basically users at once. It's helpful to make sure that everyone is on the same Wi-Fi network and ensure that everyone is on the same tenant. So if you happen to be at a different school or visiting a different school and then maybe not part of your district, you may find that those students may not be able to join the same world. So let's go over to Rob, who's going to show us how to access the lesson library in the Minecraft Education software.
Hi teachers, my name's Rob. I'm going to show you how we can organise our lessons so that we're ready to go when the students come into the classroom. So to begin with, we need to choose a world that we're actually going to be sharing or using in our classroom. To get to our library of worlds that we've got on Minecraft Education, if we go to play, we can go to view library over on the right hand side here. And I'm actually going to be going into the monthly build challenges because one of the worlds in there is this one that I need for my lesson today. So if I scroll down, I'm going to be doing a lesson called Build a Treehouse because we've been looking at different places that people live, and so the students in my class are going to be working to show me what they're going to be building with this particular tree house. This tree is a really big tree within the world, and we're going to be creating different spaces that people can live within that world. So this could be done as a whole class, it could be done as an individual activity as well. So in this space here, I can click on lesson plan, and that'll actually take me to the Minecraft website and show me the lesson plan relating specifically to this world. Because I'm going to be using the world in a different way, I'm just going to click create world, and that's going to download the world onto my device and have it ready so that I can have a look at this world and see what we're going to do. So you can see here that I spawn right in front of a large tree. I am in creative mode, so if I double click, I can start to fly around the tree so that I can have a look at all different aspects there. Now, in this particular world, if I right click on the chest, you can see that I've got a number of materials that I can build with. These are the things that the students will get when they first come in, and they'll be able to use those materials to build the tree house directly in this space here. Now, to begin with, once I'm in my class and I have my students ready and I'd like them to join my world, that's when I can hit escape on my keyboard and I go across to this second tab here that actually has the faces in there. That's our multiplayer tab, and I can click start hosting. So if I click on that, it does check to see that I'm definitely sure that I want to host. When I click on confirm, it's going to give me what's called a join code. So you can see that these little pictures here, they've become my join code, and that might be something that I would display up on my whiteboard at the front of the classroom or send to my students so that they can join my world. If we're working remotely, I might put it into Team or another LMS so that the students can actually join the world. So now we'll have a quick look at how things will look for students when they come to join my world.
All right, so perfect. Rob is ready to host his treehouse world. We have 3 students who are now going to join us, and Rob is going to ask them to join that world.
Okay, so now we're at the stage where we're ready to invite the students into our world. When I hit escape on my keyboard, you'll see that it brings up my settings options and things like that. This tab over on the right hand side is our multiplayer tab. If I click on that, it's a space where I can click start hosting. When I click on start hosting, it gives me a confirmation screen. When I click confirm, it's actually going to build in a join code here that I can give to my students and they can join my world. So the code, you can put this on your whiteboard at the front of the classroom if your students are with you in the class. If you're doing this remotely, you might put it onto Microsoft Teams or a different LMS that you might be using. But when the students get that code, they can put that into their device and that will help them to join your world. So in this case, the code is Alex, balloon, water bucket, and pickaxe. And you can see that as I put my mouse over each of those areas, it actually gives me the correct name of these. The students will generally know the names of each of these different images, but as a teacher, it takes you a while to remember each of these. So just move your cursor over and that will help you to remember what each of them is called. As you do that, you'll see that the students are starting to pop into my world. In this area here, you can see that there's a different image or a different icon over to the right-hand side of each of the students' names. So in this case, it shows whether or not they're a member or an operator. So in Tenant, you'll find that the teachers will come in as operators and the students will come in as members. So I've got my class of 3 students here, and you can see that they're super excited to be in the world already, jumping around and being very happy. So I'm going to jump back into the world, and this will be where you would explain or give the students the idea of what it is that they need to do. In our particular world, we've got a tree house. I've got my 3 students, so this could be 3 groups of students as well. So in this situation, I'm going to have one student is going to be building a different level of our tree house each. So Tamara, we're going to double click your spacebar and we're going to fly up to our first level of the tree house. And Tamara, you're going to be building this first level of the tree house here. If I go up a little bit higher, Sash, you're going to be working up in this level of the treehouse, so you'll be in the center level, and right up the very top, we're going to have Kristen building the top level of our treehouse. So once you've given your instructions, that's where you can start to let the kids go and they can actually have a turn of starting to build. So this is the stage where, as a teacher, you may do a little bit of flying around to have a look at what they're doing, but most often in my class, I'll leave my character in the world somewhere out of the way, and I would get up from my desk and I'd go and walk around the classroom and talk to the students about what they're doing and how they're doing it, why they're making the choices they are, and generally having a discussion about the purpose of the things that they're doing in this particular world, and that's where a lot of the real learning occurs. Now, you might also in this space here, you might notice that there's some students who need a bit of help or who are going a bit slower. So that might be where you actually go in and work with those students. A lot of the time when I do that, the kids are still, even the slower kids in this are quicker than I am doing Minecraft. So it's great to actually let them do the work and you be the person who supports them by talking about the choices they're making or what they're doing in this space here. Now, teachers, I found here that one of my students has actually left the building. So if I need that student to come back, so they may have gone adventuring or they may have just gotten lost accidentally, or they could just be off finding some other things to do within this particular world. An easy way to get that student back, whether they've fallen down a mine shaft or whether they've deliberately started flying away, is that if I hit my enter key, it's going to bring up my section where I can put in some commands. So I'm going to click the slash button down the side and I'm going to go to teleport, and the question is teleport who, and I'm going to teleport Kristen because that's the student who I know is in the wrong place, and it says where do I want to teleport her to. So when I click on that, I'm going to teleport her back to me. So you can see I've got the option of teleporting her to whichever student I need or whichever person within that world. And then I click on the send key over on the right hand side, and what that's going to do is that teleports Kristen back to the place where she should be, which gets her out of any trouble or issues that she may have been experiencing. So if I hit my enter button, I'll just do that one more time. I can click on the / command, and this is where I get a number of different really good simple things that are used quite often within Minecraft. So setting the world spawn means that's where the students will turn up when they first join the world. The teleport was what we've just had an example of. Now the time option, so you can see how it says always day is enabled in this level. In this particular level, it means that it's been overwritten, so you can't change the time of day in this particular situation. And then with the weather, you can see that when I click on weather, I've got the option of making it clear, rain, or thunderstorm. So if I clicked on thunderstorm, what's going to happen in that when I send that? As you can see that the rain starts straight away, everything becomes quite dark and gloomy. Because that's not really what we want in this particular lesson, I'm going to go back to weather, and I'm going to change it to clear. And when I click on clear, that's going to clear up all of our weather. It's going to go back to a nice blue sky, and we'll continue on with our lovely day that we had for building tree houses.
So we could see that our students have been working very hard to build their section of the tree house. However, it's time to start collecting evidence about their work. There are a couple of options that you can consider. You could essentially take the world file itself and explore it on your own. If you're not hosting a world and students are doing this individually in their own world, you will have to get them to export it, and then you'll import it and basically kind of walk or fly around and explore what they have done. If you choose this option, you'll want to make sure that students have included information for the user or for you to interact with. We normally refer to this as communicating, and here are a couple of options. Students have access to things like signs, chalkboards, or NPCs. NPC stands for non-player character. Students can type information, instructions, or dialogue into these forms of communication, and you can use that to understand what they have built. Our second option is using the book and quill, and this is the one that Rob is going to use with his class today. We normally follow a 3-step process for this. We normally ask the students to access the camera in their inventory and start taking some photos of what they have built. We then ask them to access the book and quill. And inside the book and quill, they can place their photos there and then type in a description of what the photo represents. From there, they'll sign that book, and that means they'll be able to export it as a PDF. You then can use whatever platforms are appropriate for your setting to collect that PDF. So you might be simply printing it, might be using an LMS program to collect that work, or maybe something like a presentation so the students will just put it onto the screen and explain it. Another option is embedding additional ICT capabilities by getting the students to embed the use of screen recording tools to enable them to explain their work. You could look at using some filming applications like Flipgrid or even Microsoft Stream. You could also use some of the stuff you might find on the physical hardware itself. So things like the Windows game mode by clicking on Windows key G. If you're on something like a MacBook, you might like to use something like QuickTime, or if you're on an iPad, don't forget that you can change the dock settings so that that includes screen recording. So let's go back over to Rob and his class, and he's going to inform the students to start using the book and quill and camera to document their work.
So now that we've given the students a bit of time to work on their builds, you can see that each of my students have built at their own level, at their own speed. Now, some of you students are going to build super quick and they're going to have these fantastic builds that you can have a look at, whereas others are going to take a little bit longer and they may not get nearly as much done. One of the main important things you need to do in Minecraft is set a time limit. The time limit's most important because the students need to know, the same as with any other work that they're doing, they do have a set amount of time to get that finished, and it's not something they can just keep working on as long as they like. Now, in this situation, I want the students to actually capture the work they've done and tell me about what are some of the choices they've made and why they've made those choices. So to do that, my students are going to be using their book and quill. So to get their book and quill, they're going to go into their inventory. So students, can you press E on your keyboard, please? If my students had iPads, once again, they would use the 3 dots over on the right-hand side of their hotbar, and that would get them into their inventory. Once you're in your inventory, you can either use the search function and type in book and quill, and once you've typed that, then you can get the book and quill and put it down in your hotbar. Then I'd also like you to find the camera. So if you type in camera, you'll find that there's a camera there as well. Now what the students are going to be doing then, once they've closed their inventory, they're going to use their camera and they're going to take photos of their particular area. So to take a photo of their area, they right click, so they can fly out past their area or away from their area, get a good angle that they like and take a photo. And they can do that a number of times to get different views of their particular area. And those photos they're going to be able to import into their book and quill as well. Your students may also put on some signs where they might put some more information. So using the camera, they can take photos of that information and then they can put that into their book and quill. So once they go to their book and quill, they right click on that. And now they've got the book that they can actually type straight into, or you might have them add one of the photos that they've taken from their camera, so it will show all the photos they've taken. You can click straight on a photo, it'll put that photo in there, and then they can type on another page. They can spell a bit better than I can. Once they've finished with all of their writing, so they can actually do multiple pages on this, so they can do a little bit and then switch over to another page. When they're finished with all of their writing, they can sign off on their book and quill, they can title it, and it'll always have their name as the author of that particular book. When they sign and close that book though, it will be no longer editable. One change that will happen, so it'll show you it's not an editable book. You'll see that in my hotbar now, it's a very shiny sort of glowy wave that's going over there. So if I right click on that book now, I can see what's been written in there, but I can't make any more changes to that. So no matter how many times I click on that, I can't make any changes. I can choose to export it though, and if I export it, I can just put it straight out into my file library as a PDF document. And that's just one of the ways that you can get the students to show you what they've created and what they've built with Minecraft World. Thank you very much.
So before we finish up, we want to make sure you get some recognition for joining our session today. So if you go to education.microsoft.com, look up in the top right-hand corner, you can select Redeem Achievement Code. From there, if you place the code that's on the screen now, that'll give you recognition for joining us today for our session. Once you've done that, you can find the session in your transcript by clicking on My Profile, then clicking on View Transcript. So both Rob and I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for joining us today. We hope that you've learned something and that you'll be able to go back to the classroom, host a world, and have a really great time learning with Minecraft Education Edition.
Hello E2 and welcome to my talk about how to give a talk. It's very meta. Now I have to admit that when I first got the topic of this talk that I was going to be doing, and I knew that it was going to be pre-recorded, my first instinct was to create a very polished video with fancy editing and transitions and all sorts of things. But then I scrapped that whole idea because I realized that the whole point of this talk is to give you some ideas about how to deliver a powerful talk to a live audience. And yes, we will be going back to live audiences again. It's going to happen. It's going to be amazing. We're going to be at E2 next year, crawling over each other in the audience and licking lampposts and stuff. It's going to be amazing. My name is Zia Hassan. I am a learning consultant out in Washington, D.C. I don't know where you all are, but future me right now is in the chat. So if you do have questions or comments or something you want to discuss with me, I'm there watching this very recording with you and probably noticing all sorts of weird pieces of dust on my clothing. Now, it's important that you know why I'm qualified to give this talk. When I was very, very young, I got a tape recorder. My father owned a Sony Walkman that had a record button, and I learned how to take a blank cassette tape and record my voice to it, which was the most thrilling experience in the world because now I got to be somebody like the radio DJs that I looked up to. I recorded myself doing full radio shows with music and everything, and it was just a fun thing for me. I was passionate about it. And then I was given the lead role in a school play. This was a school play in first grade called The Foolish Molar. I didn't even audition for this role. They just gave it to me. I don't know why. I still don't know why. In this play, I am a tooth, along with other kids in my class that are also playing teeth. But I am the lead because I am the molar, and I foolishly had candy and got a cavity. So that was my first time being on stage. And the feeling of being in front of an audience and manipulating their emotions, influencing them, telling a story just really ingrained itself deep inside of me, and I continued to do it throughout my life. In middle school, I joined a theater troupe and I started doing improv theater. That continued throughout high school, and then eventually I became a singer-songwriter, which I've been doing for the last, I don't know, 25 years here in DC. And what I do is I get on stage and I tell my stories and I play my songs and hopefully create an emotional connection to the audience before everything is said and done. And then, of course, I became a teacher and I taught 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, which every single day when you're in front of a live audience and that live audience is children, you really get a knack for public speaking because you have to keep their attention. You have to keep them engaged. And then now my job is to be a tech trainer. I also teach a college course, and with college students, especially in a night course like the one that I teach, they fall asleep pretty quickly unless you keep them engaged. I've probably given speeches to tens of thousands of people. That's a lot of people to speak in front of. I don't get stage fright anymore. It's funny that if you were a live audience, I would be way more comfortable talking to you because I could see your face. I could breathe the same air as you, and we're going to do that really soon, I promise. But a lot of people ask me how I plan my talks, how I structure them, how I rehearse, and so this video is like the secrets behind all of the things that I do when I give a talk in public. So this is going to be in no particular order. We're going to take a question that I have been asked before. I keep a record of these, and I'm going to answer it for the first time in this speech on this video for you. Here's the first question. So here's what I say. Go out of your mind. That's right. Go out of your mind. And what that means is there is an internal narrator inside of your head. And you can actually make it say hello to you right now. Give it a shot. Make your internal narrator say hello to you. Make it scream really loud inside of your mind. You can control it, and it talks to you at all times of the day. And if it talks to you while you're giving a speech, then you're very likely to be distracted by it. It's kind of like talking to someone while the radio is playing and you get distracted by what's on the radio. So here's what you do to remedy this. Develop a practice of mindfulness. I know you've heard this before, but it's a lot easier than you might think. All you have to do for a few minutes a day, 3, 4, 5 minutes, is sit down and listen to the narrator, but don't interact with it. Anytime the narrator talks, let it talk. And after a while, if you just let it talk, it ends up getting quiet. Now you have to do this. It's like building a muscle. It's like going to the gym. You have to do this on a regular basis. Otherwise, you won't feel the effect of it when you go in front of a live audience. So make sure that you're practicing every day going outside of your mind. Should you slow down? That's a very common piece of advice, to slow down. I don't like this advice because here's what it sounds like when I slow myself down. Hello, welcome to my talk about TPS reports. That can become boring really fast. So here's what you are going to do instead. You are going to talk like you normally talk, at the pace that you normally talk, except you are going to enunciate every single word that you say. If you enunciate every single word that you say and say it really crisp and clear, it's really hard to speak fast like that unless you're one of those people that can talk really, really, really fast and still enunciate. And that's not many of us. If that's you, you're probably already very good at public speaking and you don't need my help. So don't think about slowing down. Instead, your cue is to enunciate every single word while speaking at your regular pace. The first thing you want to do is forget the idea of practicing in front of a mirror. You are not going to give a speech to a mirror. You are not going to give a speech to yourself. So it's important instead to first start by giving a speech to an empty room. And you are going to use your phone to record yourself giving that speech so that you can watch it afterwards. And yes, it's going to be painful if you aren't used to this, to watch yourself give a speech. It is painful, but you're going to do it because it's going to help you find ways to make your speech better. It's going to show you where you are acting in particular ways that might be distracting or boring or too over the top, and you can really contain it by watching this recording. It's kind of like how sports teams watch recordings of their games so they can do their game better the next time. I don't really know much about sports, but I think that's a pretty good strategy. And then, if you can, you need to get a test audience for your speech. You need to get a small audience of people in front of you that can give you feedback. So give your speech to a small audience of people and ask them these two questions. You can ask them more than this, but these are the two you need to ask them. Where were you most engaged, and where did I lose you? Where did your attention drift? If your audience can tell you when their attention waxed and waned, you have a really good idea of what parts of your speech were effective and which parts of your speech were not. Another thing people like to do is do a quick version of their speech once they get it down, just to go through the different parts of it. You don't have to give it in full. You just kind of hit the notes, and that kind of cements in your brain the structure of the speech so that you can fill it with all the different words that you're going to put into the speech when you actually give it. Now here's the thing. We talked about the speed. We talked about enunciating your speech. The really important thing to remember, and this will throw you off if you ever go on a stage after rehearsing. You rehearse at a good pace, you get on stage, and then on stage, because you're in front of a live audience, adrenaline is pumping through your body, and immediately you start to speed up. When there are those issues where someone is talking too fast, it is usually not because they're just a fast talker. It's usually because there is adrenaline pumping through them, because it's a very nerve-wracking event if you've never done it before or if you don't do it that often. and so your speech speeds up. So you might want to, right before you go on stage, look at some kind of reminder to slow down. This is not to say you should rehearse in a way that's really, really slow, but it's just to remind yourself and to sort of bring yourself back to rehearsal pace when you're in front of a live audience. It just requires a little bit of a reminder, a little bit of a mental shift. Okay, let's talk about your slides. I don't know how to tell you this without being direct, so I'm just going to be direct. Your slides have too many words on them. Your slides have too many words on them. If they have more than like 5 words, 7 words, there are too many words. Here is the deal. Your job as a presenter is to transfer emotion. You are doing an emotional transfer. This emotion that I am feeling right now should be making an imprint on you wherever it is you are. So if you put words on a slide, even if you're not reading those words off of the slide, your audience is reading those words on the slide, or at least they're trying to, but at the same time, you are giving a presentation and trying to transfer emotion, and putting words on a slide like that causes friction in that process. Get rid of the words and focus on your delivery. If you use visuals, and it's a great idea to use visuals, I really recommend using stock photos. Use stock photos to make your points. Maybe throw in 3 to 5 words if you feel like it's necessary, but see if you can make your slides completely free of paragraphs, sentences. Make them as concise as possible. Make them add to and enhance your emotional transfer. That is the goal of a presentation, a good presentation. If you read The Art of Public Speaking, a book by Dale Carnegie, famous for writing the book How to Win Friends and Influence People, one of the tips that he gives is to vary your pitch and the speed at which you talk. And you might have been noticing that that's something I've been doing in this talk, but I don't think about it consciously, because when people hear this tip, they think to themselves, okay, I need to go on stage and I need to fluctuate my voice and I need to speed up sometimes and slow down other times. That can work, but it's a little bit artificial. Here's what you're going to do instead. Instead, you are going to get curious and passionate about your topic. You can tell that I love public speaking. You can tell that this is something that fires me up. And just because it's special to me, my voice will naturally follow that passion. And when your voice naturally follows your passion, it will vary in pitch and it will vary in speed, and it will do so naturally in a way that connects emotionally to your audience and doesn't sound forced. So if you aren't already fascinated by your topic, if you aren't already interested in your topic, I recommend finding some way to do that. I don't really know what that might mean for you. It might mean some more research or maybe something like that, but you need to make sure that you get on top of it. This is something that you can really play with, and you don't want to overdo it, because if you're constantly moving your hands around, then that is going to be a distraction. So think about it like this. You have gross motors, those big muscles in your body, like your arms, your legs. You also have fine motors, like your fingers, like your toes. And what I like to do, and this is just me, so you can take this for what it's worth, I like to be a little bit reserved with my gross motors, and I like to be a little bit more flexible with my fine motors. So you'll see me doing a lot of things with my hands, with my fingers, and I don't think about it. I just kind of let my hands do a little bit of talking as I'm going. But you want to make sure when you watch your video back of your presentation that the hands aren't really distracting the audience. And that's something you can ask your test audience when you do a test audience run. That's really important because it frames the entire way that the audience sees the topic. There's an amazing YouTuber named Michael Stevens. He goes by the name of Vsauce on YouTube. Check out his channel. It is phenomenal. But what's really interesting about his videos, other than the content of the videos, are the titles of the videos. There's a video he has called How High Can We Build? That's fascinating. That's a really fascinating question to think about. How high can we build a building and without it falling down? How does gravity pull from both the Earth and from space at the same time, and where's the breaking point? The video itself is about gravity, but can you imagine the difference between saying, here's a video about gravity versus how high can we build? There's a difference. And the title really makes a difference. For instance, if I were to make a video about nutrition for toddlers, if I call it Nutrition for Toddlers One-on-One, that is a snooze fest. And I could give a great presentation, the exact same presentation, and call it something like How to Stop Your Toddler from Throwing Food on the Floor, and I guarantee more people will be interested in the topic. Even if the content is exactly the same, the way that I framed it, the entry point, makes a huge difference. I got this tip from a high school teacher, one of my high school teachers when I was in high school, which was when you are changing to a different subtopic in your speech, you should move across the stage. You should walk to your new topic. Don't do this. It looks awkward. Instead, provide movement through story. Now, story can be used very effectively to make your points, and make sure that your story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And make sure that those beginning, middle, and end points are clear. If you have a beginning, middle, and end of a narrative arc, your audience will feel the movement of the story. And yes, you can physically move as well when it feels necessary to do so, but you don't have to force yourself to walk to a new point every time you have a new subtopic. I will tell you that the most influential, inspiring speech that I ever heard was 20 seconds long. We'll come back to that in a minute. There are triggers that you can use. There's a great book by Sally Hogshead called Fascinate that actually talks about these different triggers. But my favorite trigger from this book that you can use to get someone's attention, to make them fascinated in the topic that you're talking about, is you can create curiosity. I just did that for you when I told you about an influential speech that I heard, the most influential speech that changed my life, that was 20 seconds long. When I said that, you're probably thinking to yourself, well, what was that speech? Come back to that. Tell me. And it makes you fascinated, and it makes you keep listening to the end of this little piece here. But one thing you can try, many people when they are about to give a speech on a stage, they hide in the green room, and they're nervous, and they're waiting, and when they finally come out, they haven't spoken to anyone in like 20 minutes. Now, you don't want to ruin your voice during that time, but I recommend talking to other people. It could be the other presenters that you're working with at a conference. It could be people in the audience that you're meeting and greeting as you go. And when you're having these conversations, you can strategically have this sort of back and forth with them, this rapport that you're already starting to build, and you can kind of practice coming up with interesting things to say. You can play off of the things that they say. You can make a joke. You can try things out. It's a low stakes environment to get you warmed up for the actual speech. Some people do, I don't know, vocal gymnastics, little acrobatics, mommy maybe mash my M&Ms, that sort of thing. And that's probably a good way to warm up your voice and your tongue. But interacting with people is an even better way to warm up for a speech. I recommend you do that. This requires practice. Here is my best suggestion for how to be more articulate. You shower every day, don't you? I'm sure some of you do. In the shower, if you're about to give a speech, start to talk as if you are presenting. And you can talk about your topic. You can go back and revise. This is actually how I came up with a lot of the content for this speech. I did it all in the shower. By the way, you can buy waterproof shower pads that repel water, and you use a pencil, and you can write down your ideas when you're in the shower as well. It's a great way to make sure that good ideas don't go down the drain. All right, people get worried about filler words, things like ums and ahs and those words that kind of just fill up the space in between actual thoughts. Here's the trick, and you kind of have to train yourself to do this. Every time you feel yourself getting to a filler word, replace it with silence. It feels weird to replace an or an ah with silence, but in your mind, it feels like that silent bit is longer than it does for the audience. Remember that the audience is also processing the information that they're receiving as you are saying it. So when you pause, not only do you get rid of those filler words, but you also allow the audience to digest what you are saying. So I recommend, if you can, to go to your speaking environment early and get a feel for it. Breathe the air, stand on the stage, stomp your feet, yell into the crowd. With no one there, you can really play around with the environment and you can get a feel for it. And by the time you actually deliver your speech, you're going to be a lot more comfortable with that space. Now, what happens if you get to your stage and it is not what you expected? I once played on a stage where there was a loud air conditioner next to me for my entire set. It kept turning on, and it kept turning off. And in the times where it was off, you could hear me playing. In the times where it was on, it was definitely loud and kind of overpowering my performance, even though I was playing through a speaker. So I played with that idea. So this is what I did. At one point, the owner of this little room turned the air conditioner off. And you know how when you turn off an air conditioner, it takes a few minutes before it actually shuts down? Like there's a good lag time between flipping the switch and the air conditioner actually turning off. So I turned to the air conditioner and I made a magical gesture at it right at the moment I thought it might turn off. And I was right, and the air conditioner shut down right as I made this magical gesture at it. And everybody stood up and applauded for me. That was the most applause I got that night. And it was because I learned how to play with my environment. I was open to the fact that this was kind of annoying and this was kind of getting in the way of my performance, and I just made it work for me. I just came up with an idea and played with it. That takes a little bit of experience, but look for those things. When you have a situation, something goes wrong, you can always play with it. I was giving a speech once at a local university here in DC, and I walked out to a crowd of people and I said, "Good morning," and I said the name of the institution, and I said the wrong name of the institution. I said good morning to the wrong college. And when they informed me that I had said the wrong name, I was extremely embarrassed. So I left the room in a very dramatic fashion. I didn't really know how to recover from that just by standing there on stage. So I ran out of the room in a very dramatic fashion. Everybody laughed. I came back in as if nothing had happened, and I started all over again as if nothing had happened. And they thought it was really funny, and later I was told it was a really good save. And compare that to what some people might do and say, "Oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. I can't believe I just did that. Please forgive me." At that point, the speech is already off the rails. If you start from that place of that energy, then that affects the rest of your presentation. So make sure if you make some huge mistake like I did, that you do something kind of dramatic to recover from it and bring back that energy. It will look different for you and your personality and the people you're presenting to, but that's what I did in this particular instance. Okay, one last thing, and I know that the background looks a little bit different right now because it's the next morning. I wore the same shirt and even put my ring back on so that it didn't look like there were any continuity errors. I had mentioned earlier in the talk that there was a speech that was given that was really persuasive and influential for me. It changed my life, and it was only 20 seconds long. I work at Anne Arundel Community College, which is a college in Maryland. I teach a human growth and development course there, and every year there's a meeting for the adjunct professors to come and share ideas and just get on the same page with each other. It's once a year, but at the very first one that I did, there was a person there from the Anne Arundel Community College coaching program. And that is a program that trains new coaches to go out into the world and help people with their dilemmas. I will be honest with you, I don't even remember the words that were said in this presentation from the person giving it. I remember that she had about 20 seconds to kind of advertise for this program. But after that 20 seconds was over, I was completely sold, and I knew that doing this program would change my life. And I have now done the program, and it has changed my life. And the reason why I bring this up is because that speech that she gave had no stories in it. It had no narrative arc. It was actually very fast. She spoke very fast. A lot of the ideas that I've given you in this video, she didn't really follow those necessarily. But the subject matter was like lock and key for my brain. And this is maybe the most important lesson of all. If you can figure out what the key is to the lock of your audience's minds, what is going to unlock some kind of passion in them, and if you can communicate that with passion, then you might change someone's life with your public speaking. You might change a child's life if you work in the classroom. You might change a conference member's life if you're speaking at a conference. And when I told her later on that this had occurred during those 20 seconds, she was almost surprised. And that's another thing to remember. We often don't know just how much impact our words have. So if you are ever feeling like what I have to say and what I have to say in this speech isn't that important, or I'm going to sound like I don't know what I'm talking about, just remember that there is very likely somebody out there that hears your words, takes your words, and something about their lives will change as a result of your words. So I encourage you to go out there, talk to people, share your story, share your ideas, and as you're using all these different techniques, go ahead and tweet at me, send me messages on Instagram, wherever you can find me online. And then check out my podcast, which is called Gently Down the Stream, where I talk just like this every single week about topics that have to do with changing your life. So that's it, E2. I care about you very much, and I know you're going to go out there and change people's lives with your public speaking, and I cannot wait to be there to cheer you on.